The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people are evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spent a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. It was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kilauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? And it was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dane started coming to and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally gotten.
Aloha everyone, I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont from a nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. Today is Thursday, October 24th, 2024, and Kilauea is not erupting, but actually quaking again a little bit. So we'll talk about that, as well as revisit a topic on American Samoa And that was a topic of a Volcano Awareness Month presentation earlier this year. So that's our menu today. How are you, Dane? How's your week been?
Oh, doing pretty good. It's been kind of nice, getting a little cooler out here, going into the winter and the fall months. So it's been more enjoyable in terms of temperature and all that kind of stuff, but been busy with a little bit of other things. But yeah, I got a little bit of a dive back into the last Volcano Awareness Month. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought, since it is a little time of quiet, we could take a moment and reflect and put things in context and just remember the range of activity that's possible and the range of work the USGS does as well as part of that.
Yeah. And that'll close us out for all of our Volcano Awareness Month talks as well. Yeah, that's the last one.
No, it's not actually.
It's not. We got one more.
We got one more.
Right.
What we're doing is we're saving all the Mauna Loa stuff for next month, which would be the
Right.
2-year anniversary of Mauna Loa. So there's one more Mauna Loa talk and other Mauna Loa content, including a release of video we'll talk about later today that will feature over the next month here for Mauna Loa. But today it'll be Samoa and what's happening in Kilauea. So yeah, as usual, Dan will be leading discussion on the chat, collecting questions for us to discuss, and take it from there. Yeah, Dan, anything else?
Yeah, no, that's it. I think we can dive into it.
All right, let's do our usual housekeeping here and get ready for this week's summary. Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano Summary for October 24th, 2024. It's been 1 month since the end of Kilauea's 5-day eruption near Nāpau Crater, and magma has continued to recharge into the volcano, uplifting the area near the eruption site, as visible in the satellite radar image that covers the first 2 weeks of October here. If we look at the earthquake map over the past week, we can see that there are now additional earthquakes occurring in that area, as well as in the upper East Rift connector, and continuing at a lower level beneath the summit caldera, and especially more so in the southern caldera area. Right there. We still have ongoing south flank earthquakes as well, as that part of the volcano adjusts, moving southward away from the rift, and deep earthquakes in Pahala continuing their usual flare-up. So that's the activity of earthquakes as they look geographically. And looking at the earthquake counts, we can see that we have really jumped up over the last 3 days, where we've had a total of 133 earthquakes in that East Rift area, as reported by the USGS, compared to the previous 4 days, which had a total of only 18. So these counts you see on this graph here per day are for the entire map area that we showed of Kilauea, but it shows that same ratio, about a 4-fold increase in earthquakes over the last few days here. So that's similar to some of the recent intrusions that we've seen, and likely magma is still filling into this area. Looking at the plot of depth versus time for these earthquakes over the past week on Kilauea, we can see that it's not only the Pahala earthquakes, which do continue, maybe a little bit higher than average, but more so it's the shallow band of earthquakes that's accounting for the increased numbers. Looking at the ground tilt near the summit, the Sand Hill Station is showing us on the blue line the azimuth towards Halemaʻumaʻu, which appears to be stable, if anything deflating slightly over the last day, while at the same time, the green line that suggests the South Caldera source is inflating more so over the last few days here. So it could be a matter of shifting inflation sources as magma is filling the volcano summit area, and also finding a path to fill the East Rift. The East Rift stations of ground tilt, this one is the escape road. It's also showing more of a flat trend on the component that registers the recent intrusion and inflation on the Middle East Rift. It's more evident on a Puʻuʻōʻō tiltmeter further to the east that we have an increase from the west from that station, something that we also saw earlier in the month, which is what was picked up on that radar image. The blue line, which points straight to the rift area near the crater, beneath the crater, is showing a continued decrease, and recent visits from the USGS will show images of ferns growing due to the lack of sulfur in the area. So the crater is still 1,000 feet deep, more or less, and quiet, just picking up inflation from its west. And that's the story on Kilauea. While on Mauna Loa, there's been also a slight pickup in earthquakes over the last week. Not nearly as great in numbers, but you see here the adjustments of earthquakes on Mauna Loa over the past week, which when we consider that depth versus time, we can see that these are all in that upper 10 kilometers of the crest, which is the adjustment area of the whole mountain as it continues swelling following its 2022 eruption. Here are the earthquake rates on Mauna Loa over the last month, earthquakes per day. The last 5 days, we've been at between 4 and 6 earthquakes in that summit area, fairly steadily. Whereas the previous week, we were down between 0 and 2 for most of that time. We did reach a count of 9 last week, but that whole other week before that, we were in the range of 1 to 3 as well. So very slight increase. And if we look over the last year, we can see that in better context of how small an increase that is, while also still catching the event from 1 year ago. That was a deep flurry of earthquakes under Mauna Loa, which also is better seen in depth versus time. So you see the earthquakes, the deepest earthquake back in October of 2023 was down at 60 kilometers down, with some bands as shallow as 50 kilometers all the way up continuously to the surface. So that was a much larger adjustment within the volcanic edifice, which compared to what we're looking at just over the last week is much greater. So just for frame of reference, the adjustments we're seeing are much slower and normal within that upper part of the volcanic crest within the mountain. Overall, the pattern of expansion of the volcano is evident in the GPS, which repopulated for a few data points here over the last couple weeks. And that's our volcano summary for this week. So with that, we'll come to our volcanic hazard summary. We're still concerned mostly with mitigating impacts to people through education and preparedness. So the major threat from the volcano today is still the gas. So we turn to our VMAP, VOG Measurement and Prediction Project webpage from University of Hawaii at Manoa, which loads us this VOG forecast. With very little VOG coming out, you see hardly any color on this map. There's a little bit of this yellow shifting around here in South Kona or towards Mauna Loa Summit. A little bit here towards Kulani. Maybe, yeah, South Kona again. So very, very low amounts and closest to the admission site at Kilauea Summit. So very low levels near the volcanic background for the volcano, but these are still high levels for people who are sensitive and happen to be nearby. So be aware if that is you. So that's it for the hazards really this week, and we'll turn to the earthquakes, which can also be hazardous. We talked about that quite a bit last week, but we'll look at the regional patterns today, starting with the last 2 weeks with earthquakes plotted by depth. So here's our key, where reds are shallows and blues and greens are deeper. And as usual, we have our ongoing flurry of earthquakes around Pahala we also discussed last week. We have a wide range of these settling events across the entire island, which we also discussed last week. And then we have our earthquakes in the Kilauea sector, which we'll focus on next. First, we'll filter to the last 2 days, and you can see that those background events largely disappear. We do have one event on the west flank of Mauna Loa at a depth above sea level on the west flank, directly west from the summit, a few miles. But it's just one of these flank settling events as well. So you do expect the flanks of Mauna Loa to continue moving as it fills with magma continuing to recharge following its 2022 eruption. So a little one here and one there, no big deal. It's when you start seeing them in bigger bunches that you worry about some threshold being overcome and leading to something further. So for now, it's still just adjusting and at a slow rate, and that's all good. So zooming into Kilauea next, here on our plot by depth over the last 2 days, you can see that those earthquakes are all in the shallow region here within this rift zone, the Upper East Rift Connector especially. A couple on the summit, and also a couple bigger ones over in the Southwest Rift area as well. 2.4 that came in, what was that, earlier today, or was it yesterday? Earlier this morning. And 2.6 as well, right? So here's yesterday, and here's the one this morning, 2.6 and 2.4. So adjustments across the entire kind of flank, but focus more so within the rift zone in the last couple of days. So plotting them, here is the whole last week, and where we can sort them by size perhaps. Newest ones first. Let's go by size first. Over the last week, the 3.3 in Pahala was the largest, and all the other ones were below magnitude 3. That's part of that deep Pahala feeder swarm that's been ongoing for several years now. Filtering to the last 1 day, and looking here into Kilauea, we can see that the 2.4 on the Southwest Rift was the largest one. Let's come into the East Rift sector here. And then we have a 2.0 up here near Nāpau Crater being the largest event. A couple of 1.9s as well in a similar area. So pretty quiet on the earthquakes there. We'll continue to the monitoring. The earthquakes really pick up more when you look at them over the last 3 days and look at the smaller events that don't always show up on that map. So here's our most recent USGS daily update from this morning, 8:30 a.m. And this states a lot of the same information we've seen over the last few weeks. It's saying that there are relatively few earthquakes underneath the summit region. Here's 7. But in comparison, the Middle East Rift Zone is slightly elevated over the past day with 41 earthquakes right there. That's the most interesting thing over the last few days, is keeping track of how many of these earthquakes are happening at the summit and the rift. Summit's been fairly low. So if we go back in time, here's yesterday, Thursday. That counts the day before that. Right? So Thursday, today kind of the day before that for yesterday. 41 earthquakes. And then the day before that, we'll scroll back again. Gives us 67. That was the high so far. The day before that, we're at 29. And that's really the high. We go further back to Monday, we get 11. And we go to Sunday, it's 1. On Saturday, it's 3. And last week, Friday, the day after our previous update, also 3. So very few earthquakes all around there. We'll look at the tilt here. And if we look at Uʻuʻōʻō to start, and we look only at this 2-day summit, we might be wondering what's going on here. Here's a clue. The scale is extremely zoomed in. So something is wrong automatically here. And we look at the zoomed out 1-week version, and we see it's pretty much flatlined with these occasional steps that look like electrical signals almost. And then we see the last month, and we can recall that our signal went flatlined after this big drop a couple weeks ago. So we can no longer look at Uʻuʻōʻō until we see what's going on with that signal and it gets repaired. So instead for the summit, we'll look at Sand Hill as before. Right, interesting to note that shifting of inflation centers, as we said in our summary. If we're down the escape road, this is the one that normally would see this one on a more of a downward trend as well, but did show a little bit of an increase here. This is slightly ahead of what we saw it come in at Puʻuʻōʻō, which is here it is next. There's Puʻuʻōʻō. You see Puʻuʻōʻō comes in around the 7th. And then more recently here, within the last day or so, into that Middle East Rift area. And interesting, we see that a little bit ahead of it at the escape road there and here, or maybe it seems to flatten out a little bit. Maybe it's even coming down. Almost like it's flowing through this escape road area and Upper East Rift connector and then reaching that Middle East Rift zone perhaps a day or two later, that pressure wave. Yeah, so interesting to note how that's manifesting right now. And as we noted here, the Puʻuʻōʻō line going downwards. So the Janaka station further down is zoomed in quite a ways as well, but it's now showing a little bit of increase. And when we wonder what that might be about, we can look up rift to Puʻuʻōʻō and see that there's really no signal happening there. And in fact, it's pretty strong downward signal here. So some other local effect going on and seeing that small scale of it here. And that just teaches us a little bit about what the variations that can occur naturally at the station might be. Without really knowing exactly what it is right now, we can just see that this variation is happening. And we're pretty sure there's no magma over there because there's no gas and there's no earthquakes and no deformation anywhere near the area. So we'll keep an eye on that just to make sure as well. Coming to our comparison of the tilt and the earthquakes. Can't use Uekahuna there, but for the last week, you see the earthquakes have come up over the last 3 days here. Our current day isn't fully counted, but at the current pace, we're not going to catch up. It doesn't look like. Looks like it might have been this 2.5 day pulse right there, which you can see here once again, depth versus time plot. With an interesting little cluster that occurs in the yellow zone here, that's slightly deeper under the caldera area right there. And so usually caldera area here, although there also are some of that depth on the south flank that might get cut into there as well. So there's a full distribution once again of our earthquakes. We've looked at that already. In cross section, here's how those deeper ones fall. Multiple pathways into the volcano from depth, we imagine. Who knows exactly, right? But something along those lines. Then you have this overall, the whole island is bowed down and settling, and so you have deeper adjustments further offshore as well. Okay, so we've seen that tilt. Here's what that depth versus time for the last month looks like. So more evident, the onset and cluster of shallow earthquakes right here compared to the previous pattern. And looking over the last month, earthquakes per day, here we are. The last 2 days were over 140, looking at the entire map area. The previous day was over 80. The day before that was down to 40, and the day before that was down below 20. So it really has almost doubled for that first stretch before stabilizing and now coming down today. Over the last year, for context, here's when we had our last eruption. So the levels of earthquakes and the build up to that eruption were quite a bit higher. We're up around 1,000 earthquakes per week for much of that era. And here now we're below 500 per week, even if we are coming up to that threshold pretty close. So here over the last 5 years, earthquakes per month we're tallying it overall. And really, since our eruption in late September, October has really been quite a bit quieter. One of the quieter months over the last 6 months. In fact, most of the year. It may match April here, perhaps, but was that April? No, that's here, May, April. It could be March. Yeah, March of last year, March of this year. So that's the earthquake counts. Our GPS that was updating last week has not updated since, unfortunately. So we cannot look there for any further information. Although we'd love to see what's happening with that uplift that we detected on the GPS here by the Kainui-Ohana area. So we'll wait more data to come in on here. We do have, as USGS released, this more recent map of INSAR. Unfortunately, it ends about a week ago or so. So it is picking up the pattern, which we are seeing continuing, right? So released from the 6th to the 18th. And that's where if we once again look at the tilt here at Puʻuʻōʻō, the 6th to the 18th is this window right here. And so you're picking up this increase and bump right here. as well as this flat. So now we have another increase coming on once again, and that seems to be similarly in that area by Nāpau. And so that's the INSTAR we have from USGS. We also have the Mounts project here. Some of this stuff. Okay, there we go. Which is making automatic satellite images of the differences in the orbit passes here. Unfortunately, there was some error that occurred in late September, so we haven't had an image in over a month now, but we did have one coming in as well that spans until the 18th. So likewise, when we look at an image from this project, these ones unfortunately are cropped into the summit region, so we don't see the Middle East rift. And so in that context, we don't see a whole lot of change within the outer caldera area. There's a little bit of inflation happening here. But when we look closer into the Halemaumau pit itself, we can see a little bit more. So there is that wider image. And then looking into the pit, zoomed in right there. And these are hard to read sometimes, right? But I try to imagine like going towards the center. What's the order of color? So I see we're going from green to blue to red. And I look on a bar here where green to blue goes this way, continuing through gets to red. So this way is away from the radar, which means this is going down, right? So the deflation happening here in the middle of this pit. And so just a little different from some previous times. So this is a map that we had that goes until September 12th, which was 3 days before the eruption, when the volcano was still swelling, getting ready to erupt. And here, if we go towards the center, we see red to blue to green, red to blue to green this way towards the radar, so inflating. So there's a subtle difference there, but just reflecting what we see on a tilt as well. Right? And remember, this is a 12-day period. This one in September, and this one right here from the 18th, from the 6th to the 18th, right? So catching that earlier deflation event before it stabilized here more recently. That's all we have for the monitoring segment. So we'll switch to our observations, where we have had a release from the USGS about their webcam maintenance that they've been doing in the East Rift. So here they are. This is the R3 cam on the east flank of Puʻuʻōʻō. It's looking down rift of Puʻuʻōʻō and down towards the coastal plain as well. So there's a camera. This is one that has been showing some moisture in the images recently. So geologists, including Matt Patrick, went to the site to dry out the camera and add new desiccant today. There is Dr. Patrick himself with a case open, maintaining the equipment inside there. While there, we can look at the rim of Puʻuʻōʻō, and so there it is. And they're showing all this orange and red dirt that's filling much of the cracks in the Pahoehoe lava flows that are the remnants of old overflows when lava was filling the whole crater and spilling out over the top here and leaving these flows. It was all much bumpier. Once the crater collapsed through all this very oxidized rock that had turned red, it created that pink ash cloud, rained all this material back down, and especially near the crater, it filled in a lot of these cracks. So there it's got quite a different striking appearance from how it used to look when it was all just usually a vog out and pretty intense to be there with the ground trembling and magma moving through. That was the case from the 80s all the way through to 2018. But now they see ferns growing right there. There's one view. There's a different view of that. There's a radio for scale. Well, clearly an unplanned photo expedition here when I noticed the striking scenery. And one more back here as well. Some mosses coming in as well. Interesting views. And then, of course, What's going on inside the crater? There's a view down into Puʻuʻōʻō taken by Dr. Patrick and showing that the very lowest parts of the crater, the deepest parts, have been filled in by some collapses. But for the most part, without measuring it, it still looks most of the original depth of 1,000 feet or 300 meters deep there. So that was the update from USGS, as well as their satellite image that was posted. So here is the R3 camera. I think here's the R3 camera. The R3 camera is supposed to be here. Reload. There it is. Looking down at East Rift Zone from the east side of Puʻuʻōʻō. Area of sun towards the coastal plain there. And here's the last 24 hours going through the night. And we'll let it run through one day here before we move on. No, some rain on the lens, but it dries out quickly, and then clear views after that. All right, that's the R3 camera. We also have the PW camera that's on the west flank of Puʻuʻōʻō, looking west, the other direction. And here it is through last night and this morning, looking over that area that has both a recent eruption site and a recent fire area, where there's really not much of anything to be seen on either. Maybe I'll let it go through one more time, zoomed in here, even though it's dark for now. Here comes daybreak. And really, there's nothing exciting to point out. Minor steaming still ongoing, just from the rainfall coming in the area, groundwater as well. So that's the PW. And now we'll come to the S2 camera. Well, it was once again, okay, here's the S2 camera, which is the one on the east rim of Nāpau itself, looking into the crater and at the recent eruption site. So that minor steaming might be more visible here in this image right in there. Or not, but it's still ongoing. So those are the views we have from Kilauea for you guys today. And with that, we will move on to our Volcano Watch segment, which this week is the East Rift of Kilauea was a busy place in the 1960s. Now, for those of you that's following us for the last couple months, this is no surprise. We've gone into this at great depth, and I will not continue to repeat that over and over. So, interesting to note here that they've summarized that era of the 1960s. Here's an image from the 65 eruption, March 65, into Nāpau Crater, that deeper pit that's now all the way full that we saw from later eruptions. They go through here. Let's just very quickly recap. Following 1960, three quick summit eruptions in first half of 61. There were eruptions that occur in 1962 and 63, each that only last 2 days near Nāpau Crater. And in October 63, there's a much bigger eruption between Nāpau and Kilauea. 2 in 65, one by Nāpau as well. A shift to the summit for 9 months, close to 9 months, and then back to the East Rift Zone in August and October of 68, right? With those impacting Hi'iaka Crater and later Kananui Hamo to Puʻuʻōʻō for that October one. So we showed lots of pictures and lots of data from all of that. And then they note that as the decade came to an end, the Mauna Ulu eruption starts on May 24th, 69. So for anyone who was following us in our coverage, we actually put in one more in here, which was February 69 at Alai Crater. That technically precedes the start of Mauna Ulu. Or if it starts a Mauna Ulu eruption, then it should say February one way or the other. So that is Volcano Watch for this week. So we've talked a lot about Mauna Loa already, but we can look at some further signals. The tilt over the last week is showing the normal daily variations, and earthquakes over the last week show nothing unusual, and the truer nature of how spread out these events actually are in space and time for the most part. As we zoom further out to the last month, we see some of the wiggles in the tilt that we think are part of that monthly cycle. There are some other signals embedded in here, but it's hard to pick them out. And perhaps there are some adjustments to Kilauea occurring here as well with Mauna Loa's flank. So over the last month, depth versus time, these cluster a little bit more, but are still seem to be spaced out compared to the ongoing adjustments within Mauna Loa. Earthquake rates, we pointed out, are a little bit higher than before, but not that high really. Over the last year, into context per week, still quite low, under 20 per week. And we're still under 50 per month, perhaps, as well. So very low counts compared to anything we saw in the build up to 2022 for the several years ahead of that eruption. It's all pretty quiet, and if you look at this 1 week or 1 month period, it's really easy to see how quiet it actually is. But to get more information, occasionally we like to jump into this 1 year bucket. So there's all the last year of earthquakes in the summit area plotted together. And really a spray of events all over the map. But it is showing that there is adjustment in this area that we identify as a southeast flank here that moves away from the summit area. The northwest flank is much more pinned because of Hawaiian Volcano to the north there, but it also has adjustments that occur more so in this direction here. So we see some of that happening. Then we see these blue and purple events showing adjustments deep down at the base of the volcanic pile, the feeder area into the volcano right in there. So you really see how spread out they actually are in this view. When we come down and look at depth versus time for the last, or here's a cross section actually. You have cross section. There's those deep ones, and then here's some of that adjustment in the base of the seafloor, and the shallow vents all on the flanks here as well. And here's the west flank area right there. So here, depth versus time. Here's where we can really see that deep pulse that came through just under a year ago, and adjustment since. And here's where it looks more squished together in an ascending fashion, where really we know that there's a lot of time and space embedded within here as well. So that's all for our current Mauna Loa data. It is worth mentioning the USGS did release a new data set featuring Mauna Loa webcam imagery as well. This was released just a couple of days ago. It has, what is it, Dane? 180 gigabytes of data, something like that. So
yeah, I think something serious right there.
Lots of
yeah, there's a whole everything you need is in that archive, and probably more than you need. Verbose is how I describe it.
Yeah, and I saw a write-up that mentioned that there actually includes some imagery that was not visible online on webcams online, right? It was from...
Yeah. I didn't get to see how much of a mix it was, but there was, my feeling was near half and half. Would be maybe a little more on the webcams, but there was definitely a split where there's footage in there that we hadn't seen before publicly. It was just, the camera was just taking photos, stationary, and then somebody from the helicopter would come and grab the SD card eventually. So not very useful for what we were doing at the time, but at this point, it's great.
Yeah, so we'll definitely include what we can compile of that for you guys in next month's coverage of the 2-year anniversary of the eruption. But for now, we'll just let you know that that data is out there. If you just can't wait and have to look for yourself, you can go find this release, which we've posted across the Hawaii Tracker Network as well. So that is it for our volcanoes here in Hawaii. We'll turn to our community corner next. Let me put that on the screen here, and let's bring on Lou, and I will bow out here for a minute.
All right, Phil, let's go ahead and get Lou in here. There and there. Hey, Lou, how you doing? Hey, I'm doing good. How you doing?
All right.
Doing good? Are you ready for your community corner?
I
am. Let's get this
All
up
right.
there. Here we go. So this week,
Oh, fancy.
you like that?
Yeah.
I saved that for you as a little surprise. It's Halloween week. Let's go through there. So we have some stuff going on up at the park this week. And the Sulfur Banks is one of them that's closed. That's a hiking trail near the visitor center and the volcano house. It's closed from construction from the 21st of October to December 12th, 24. So be aware of that if you like hiking up there. And everything else is still pretty much the same as for the campgrounds closed. The Nāpau Crater and campgrounds closed. Construction still going on everywhere around the park. Drive slow. Yellow jackets are swarming. Be aware. And helicopter operations continue for the fire. But I don't know. I don't have any fire information on that at all, other than what they're putting up there for the alert. There's a shot of the Sulfur Banks boardwalk, which is an absolutely great trail to hike if you've ever been up there. Trail in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park will temporarily close for boardwalk repairs October 21st through December 12th, 2024. They're replacing aging wooden boardwalk to improve visitor safety at Hakulamanu. The area, also called Sulfur Banks, is known for the bright yellow sulfur crystals that adorn the lava rocks and for other volcanic gases and steam that seep from the ground. And I wanted to bring attention to this right here, Michael Newman. He was recognized just recently at the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. He's the visual information specialist. He created some pretty amazing videos and maps that are available on the Volcanoes National Park website. Michael produced several innovative digital products for Native Hawaiian, Asian American, and Pacific Islander heritage that are featured on the park website. You can see he even went to Washington, D.C. to get his award there. So I encourage you to check that out. Now for the Halloween stuff that's going on at the park. Get ready for a spooktacular adventure at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park and Kahuku, the annual Halloween bingo scavenger hunt. So you get a bingo card either down at the Kahuku unit or the Kilauea Visitor Center. And don't forget to wear your favorite costume. Dane, you going? All right. Sunday, October 27th, 2024, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's at both the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park and the Kahuku unit. And there is also another event going on. Artist in residence, photographer Stan Honda. He'll be down at the Kahuku unit this Saturday, October 26th. I went on his Instagram and took a look at some of his photos, and they're just absolutely amazing. So this is the time, since the park is not doing their After Dark in the Park presentations up top, is a good chance to get down to Kahuku unit and enjoy that area. And check out Stan Honda that Saturday, October 26th at 9:30. It's an hour-and-a-half show. He's a renowned New York-based artist who's bound to draw a crowd, so arrive early. And our friends at the Pacific Tsunami Museum have a Downtown Hilo Museum Square presents Spooky Square, free family-friendly trick-or-treat event. Dane, October 26th, 2 to 4 p.m. The Downtown Hilo Museum Square presents Spooky Square 2024. The Museum Square is partnered with businesses around the block for a free family-friendly trick-or-treat event. Put on your costumes and spend the afternoon exploring downtown Hilo and collecting trick-or-treats. And the 2-day Boo at the Zoo event taking place at the Panieva Rainforest and Zoo is happening this weekend. The Hawaii County Department of Parks and Recreation and Friends of Panieva Zoo are presenting the event on Saturday, October 26th and Sunday, October 27th from 3 to 6 p.m. We're thrilled to announce, once again, offer a safe, family-friendly Halloween experience for our keiki at Panieva Zoo, said Mayor Mitch Roth in a news release. By extending the event to 2 days, we hope to welcome even more families, giving everyone the chance to enjoy the fun and excitement of Boo in the Zoo. Organizers would like you to know before you go, they're selling trick-or-treat bags for $1, which are required to receive the treats. Proceeds will enhance the zoo and exhibits. Boo at the Zoo is a cash-only event. The zoo will close its gates to regular visitors at 2 p.m. on the event days. Petting zoo hours will be from 1 to 2 p.m. October 26th. Event parking will be at the zoo parking lot and the Panieva Equestrian Center parking lot. So Dane, you got the Tsunami Museum you can go to first, and then you can head over on the way home, hit the zoo.
The zoo. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on.
It's at the zoo.
This one's the Hawaii County one too,
right?
Helping put on, so they have a whole bunch of resources to make this one extra special. I know a bunch of people that are volunteering there. So yeah,
definitely. This is definitely one I think we'll put on our list because it's the zoo, right?
Just don't try and pet the white kitty. It's a tiger and it's not friendly. Not like that.
No, it's not. No, it's not friendly. If you're looking to follow us on some of our other platforms, here's how to do it at hveri.org/follow. Check us out on some of the other platforms. And do not forget, Dane, I'll let you go ahead. You can talk about our survey here. There you go.
Last year, we did a little bit of a survey to try and figure out our viewers' comfort with and familiarity with different aspects of what we do and volcano education in general. So this year, we're doing a follow-up survey, and we're calling it the HVERI Impact Snapshot Survey. Should be a pretty quick survey. Just tell us how you feel, how confident you feel about certain things. And it would greatly help us out in terms of our data collection and what we're able to take back to the people that give us grants or people that are going to give us grants potentially in the future to show the impact of this type of a program and this type of content. So we appreciate everybody that's taken that, and you do not need to be in Hawaii to take that one.
Nice. Let me jump back real quick here. I just saw a question. Will the zoo cost monies? I don't know if getting into the zoo, I think that getting into the zoo is free. It's just if you want a trick or treat bag. Dano, I think that's Dano asking that question.
Maybe. All right.
Well, there we go.
All right. And that brings us a little bit to our thank yous. So we want to start out by thanking everybody that's here today. The viewers like you really help sustain everything. Like the shares, the subscriptions, they really do help. I know all the YouTubers talk about it, but it does move the algorithm and get this content in front of the eyes of new viewers. So we'd like to thank you. We'd also like to thank the Kilauea Recovery Team and Kuna Strong Grants for their support to help make this type of content, as well as our other programs possible, as well as our donators who's been so generous to donate to our community-based organization. And if you want to make a donation, we do take the super chats on YouTube. However, we encourage people to make those over at hveri.org/donate. So, and we'd like to thank all of our partners and everybody else as well. All right. I think that gets us through it.
That's us.
And,
nice work.
Yeah, that's us. And we will pass it back to Phil. Thanks, Lou.
You're welcome.
All right. And there we go. We're back. Hey, Phil.
Hey, awesome. Yeah. And maybe just worth mentioning one more time here in the middle that we should have mentioned this at the top, but next week we're going to have our update on Wednesday instead of Thursday because of Halloween night on Thursday, the 31st. So, yeah, keep that in mind. We'll talk about
how many events that are going on over the course of this next week. I don't know how much we're really avoiding, but we are moving it to Wednesday, our next live update. So it won't be on Halloween itself.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, myself and my family will be out on Thursday night next week. So that in particular, but it actually starts this week on Friday. Actually, we're going to head up to the Volcano Art Center, and I'm going to get to be a sand seal this year. So maybe next week you'll get a
fun. Well, we got to get a video of that. All right. Oh yeah, I think that gets us, and now we have our. Let me check for questions. I didn't see any while we were here, other than about the zoo charging. Check over on Facebook, make sure we got any over there, but I didn't see anything while I was there. I wonder. Oh, a question from Yvonne. I wonder why Uikahuna has a big drop in tilt. Maybe they readjusted the tiltmeter again.
It could, I mean, it's that would be possible just for the drop, but the fact that it still hasn't gotten right since that happened, that to me suggests that something else went wrong with the instrument or the wire or something, right? And we do know that there's construction happening near there. I would wonder what else it could be. So I'm not sure at all. Something maybe for Ask HVO.
Nathan asked, do we have magma flowing into the East Rift Zone regularly now?
Into that area that's as far as Nāpau Crater, yes. That has now become it has been ongoing now since a couple months ago, I'd say. Yeah.
All right. I think that does it for questions. I really did not see many while we were going through it. So yeah, if anybody does have questions, we'll try and do one more segment at the end.
Yeah, and just to reiterate on that East Rift, right? That's the area that's uprift of Puʻuʻōʻō, and that's why we talk about Puʻuʻōʻō so much, and how the ferns are growing there, and how there's no gas coming out of there, and how the tiltmeter is not moving there. So it will at one point migrate further down a rift for sure, and it's still got more room within the Middle East Rift to do that, and still not impact people. But at some point, we know it also will migrate down to where people are again, once again. So that's a lot of why we do this work, so that everyone can be better educated and prepared and aware of the changes that might occur and see things coming perhaps and see things building over years and over time. So this is one step to reoccupy the Upper East Rift of this long process that's taken 6 years since the 2018 collapse for that to happen. And so it's kind of on pace. Originally, the USGS estimated it might be decades before activity in the Lower East Rift again, and that's about the pace that we're on still right now. So we'll see what happens and keep track of it and continue to educate and share and promote better preparedness and community resilience, of course. That's why we do this. So along those lines, we'll switch now to our volcano awareness presentation for that same purpose. And today we thought we would take a break from our usual Hawaii focus and step away to Samoa, American Samoa, following a presentation of Dr. Natalia Dilling that occurred the last day of January this year in 2024. At the time that this was happening, there was that first pulse of intrusion into the Southwest Rift that preceded all the other intrusion pulses, and the Southwest Rift eruption, which preceded the Southeast Rift eruption. And so here we are after a lot of stuff has happened. We've edited it down, so it's not the full presentation. There might be a reference or two to that stuff in there, but overall, we try to make it a little bit shorter. It's supposed to run about half an hour for you guys. So without further ado, here is...
It's going to be about American Samoa's volcanoes. What we'll be covering today is why there are volcanoes in American Samoa, what happened a year and a half ago, what might a future eruption in American Samoa look like. Then we'll look at the 3 main volcanoes there a little bit more in depth. And then I'll end with what the USGS is doing in American Samoa now and going forward. So the main take-homes is that American Samoa, just like Hawaii, is built on volcanoes. And each volcano is thought to have erupted in the Holocene, so the last 10,000 years or so. Future eruptions are very likely, but generations can pass between these. So it's something that is a rare occurrence in terms of the human experience, but it most likely will happen again in the future. We don't know when. The USGS is working with local communities and local officials. We have built a volcano and earthquake monitoring network, and a lot of the credit for that goes to Jefferson Chang. And we are also doing scientific research to better understand the volcanoes of American Samoa so we can better prepare for when something happens again in the future. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but it's important to be prepared. All right, so a little bit about American Samoa. It's been inhabited for over 3,000 years, and I can't emphasize enough how important Fa'a Samoa way of life is. It's a way of life that revolves around family, faith, and a chieftain system. There are 4 populated islands in the territory. There's also Western Samoa, which I will not really be touching on today, which is an independent country. So American Samoa was annexed by the US in 1900. Legally, it's an unincorporated, unorganized territory, but in reality, it's organized with governor as the head of government. The 2020 census showed there's just under 50,000 people who live there. Most of them are on the main island of Tutuila. There's less than 1,000 in the Manua Islands. In terms of where it is, this is a map of the Pacific. Hawaii is over here. American Samoa is there. New Zealand is in, further south, if that helps situate. So the USGS has 5 volcano observatories. Looking a little bit bigger picture, there's 161 volcanoes in the US, spread across 13 states and 2 territories. And we have 5 volcano observatories that look over them. So the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory is the volcano observatory not only for Hawaii, but also for American Samoa. So the first question I posed was, why are there volcanoes in American Samoa? So there are volcanoes here because of the Samoan hotspot. So this is just like the Hawaiian Islands. There's the Hawaii hotspot for the volcanoes here, and the Samoan hotspot for American Samoa. But it's a little bit more complicated than some of the other hotspots. It's a hotspot that is going towards a trench. This is more of an issue for independent Samoa, but there's some interesting interactions between the hotspot and the trench, which make that even though independent Samoa volcanoes are much older, there has been quite a bit more recent activity. So the veneer of those islands are much more young than you might anticipate for a volcano of those ages. In American Samoa, it's still more just purely the hotspot. The islands are actually the tops of shield volcanoes. So most of the volcanoes are underwater. And there's quite a few volcanoes that have not breached the surface. So we can see here Tutuila volcano. And again, this is where the vast majority of American Samoa folks live. And then Ofu, Olusenga volcano, and Ta'u volcano. But again, these are just the tips of quite large volcanic edifices. There's also Wailu'u seamount, which is submarine, that will breach the surface at some point, probably, but not for a very long time. If we look at when they were last active, so Tutuila erupted at least once, maybe twice in the last 1,600 years. If we go to Ofu Olusenga, that last erupted in 1866 AD, and there are eyewitness accounts of that. It was, fortunately, as far as I'm aware, no one died. It was offshore, but it was quite dramatic, the accounts of it. And then Ta'u volcano, we don't know when it last erupted, probably in the Holocene. It was in unrest in 2022. And then finally, the seamount, it last erupted in 2003. And it is the one that has the most eruptions lately. So let me set the stage before July 2022. At that time, there was no volcano monitoring and no seismic equipment for any real-time purposes in American Samoa. The USGS had done a threat assessment and had identified there were 3 volcanoes in American Samoa, but they were all deemed low threat. So for example, Mauna Loa and Kilauea, those are very high threat volcanoes. This is not there's a ranking even lower than low threat, but this is pretty low out there. It would be generous to say that there was a minimal USGS presence. I would say there was no presence. The last witness eruption was in 1866. It was offshore Ofu Olusenga. So if we look at this map here, this shows American Samoa. We have Tutuila, the Manua Islands of Ofuolesenga and Ta'u. Here's a blow-up of that map, and this is about where that eruption had happened, the 1866 eruption. But there had been some submarine eruptions at Vailulu'u. Again, that's at seamount on the east in the 70s, the 90s, and the 2000s. Again, I would say it would be generous to say that there was minimal awareness that American Samoa's volcanoes could erupt again. And there's a really good reason for that. They don't erupt very often. And there's other hazards that are much more pressing. So tsunamis, there was a tsunami in 2009 that killed at least 39 people and pretty much affected everyone. There are earthquakes, there's hurricanes. There are things that are much more pressing in terms of the mental load you can bear, in terms of what hazards you can keep track of. So that's the situation in July 2022. At the end of July, the earthquake started. So again, there's no seismometers, but there are a lot of humans out there, and they were human seismometers. After a couple of days of shaking, people notified the National Weather Service at Pago Pago. And within a few days, the USGS was notified. It took many, it was a bit of a phone tree, like something's happening, we don't know what to do, who should we talk to? And finally, the USGS got involved. Around that time, the American Samoa Department of Homeland Security got involved, and all this while, the earthquakes are getting, there's more of them, and they're getting stronger or more noticeable. The felt seismicity peaked in mid-August and ended by mid-September. Some of these earthquakes had a really loud sound associated with them as well. The response to these earthquakes included the community, of course, and local, territorial, and federal partners. This was extremely stressful for people in the Manua Islands, especially at night when you couldn't see the ocean and when you can feel the earthquakes better, because generally you feel the earthquakes quite nicely when you are seated or lying down. We had no idea during this whether or not an eruption would eventuate. Fortunately, it did not, but it could have maybe gone another way, and I would be telling a very different story. Thankfully, there was no eruption that eventuated. If we look at the data we have, I'll start with this image on the left. So again, this is a map of the Pacific. American Samoa is here. I'm going to draw your attention to Wake Island, which is quite far away. But Wake Island at that time had an array of effectively underwater microphones. And because of the way they were oriented and because of physics I don't understand, they could actually pick up the earthquakes. They couldn't tell you the location of the earthquakes, but they could provide a count. And so this is a count of the number of earthquakes that were detected by the Wake Island array. In gray here is when we had no monitoring network, and in dark gray is when we had a monitoring network to locate the earthquakes. This map on the right is for those earthquakes in dark gray that we were able to locate. So you can see Ofuolesenga over here, Ta'u over here, and most of the earthquakes, well, all the earthquakes were offshore to the north. The largest magnitude was a magnitude 4.5. This only shows the earthquakes that were magnitude 2.5 or bigger. So there are over 300 earthquakes in this period. This was quite a unique response. For the USGS, we were starting from absolutely nothing. No one knew who we were. We didn't have that local trust yet. We had no presence. We had no monitoring network. We had no hazard maps. We had very limited understanding of what past activity was like. And at the start, we didn't even know which volcano was responsible. So that's a very humbling experience. This is also extremely unusual for any volcano observatory around the world. Most volcano observatories, even if they have limited networks, they have that presence, and we did not have that presence. These are also very remote islands. At that time, and most of the time, there's only 2 flights a week from Hawaii to American Samoa, and then going out to the Manua Islands is even more challenging. There's also 2 languages, so I would say most American Samoans understand English, and many are very comfortable in it, but Samoan is the primary language in the Manua Islands, and so we had to be able to provide information in both languages, and for that we really leaned heavily on the National Weather Service. There's also cultural factors. I'm not Samoan. None of the team was Samoan, and we were going in saying, trust us, we can help, which is hard, very hard. And again, the National Weather Service was key for opening doors. There's also political and historical contexts. This is an unincorporated territory. I'm not a sociologist or much of a historian, but you can imagine that there can be some factors associated with that. And finally, COVID-19 was still a factor. It was very stressful going to the airport and getting swabbed and knowing that if you were positive, you would be stuck in the airport pretty much for 2 weeks or whatever it was. So things went well, though. So one of the incredible achievements is that we were able to build a monitoring network from scratch in 2 weeks. And again, Jefferson Chang and also Marcus at the National Weather Service are really important to that. So I was the first person to arrive, and I brought with me these quite primitive seismometers called raspberry shakes. And within 48 hours, we had them installed in the Manua Islands, or 2 of them. And less than 24 hours later, we were able to rule out Wailu'u, which had been a strong candidate for what was happening, at least locally, and saying, no, this is actually much closer. This is in the Manua Islands. Reinforcements came shortly thereafter with 4 broadband seismometers and accelerometers and more raspberry shakes. And within 2 weeks, all 4 broadband, 3 of the broadbands were deployed. The 4th was later deployed in Tutuila. And it was providing real-time telemeter data, which that was a huge accomplishment in itself. In September, we were able to deploy 2 GPS stations. And these instruments are still working. In December of 2020 and last month, we did return to American Samoa to service the network. So now there are 4 broadband seismometers in American Samoa, 1 on Tutuila and 3 in the Manua Islands, that are complemented with a raspberry shake network, or supplemented by. This is a photo of Jefferson installing this seismometer over here, and you can see we had really important local support. It was hot. And this is Marcus installing the first seismometer in a school in Fitiuta. So that was the first shake that we installed. We built and strengthened partnerships across many levels of government. So again, this response included a wide range of folks. The good thing is that roles were very clearly defined. There were daily EOC meetings which provided a focal point to share information. The USGS was also very graciously invited to observe some, or be at some of the cabinet meetings and to observe some of the exercises. The territorial government coordinated the community meetings. Usually these meetings had USGS and NOAA, EOC, and the American Samoan Department of Health, along with the National Weather Service. So this is a photo right before our first trip to the Manua Islands. This is Eleanor from the National Weather Service. I can't overstate how important she is. She opened up many doors for us. So what kind of volcanic activity can we expect in American Samoa? So most of the time, nothing, which is great. So most of the time, these volcanoes are at normal and green. Almost all of the time. Sometimes it does go into volcanic unrest, as it happened in 2022. And as we saw there, this does not guarantee an eruption. Sometimes the volcano will decide to go back to sleep. So when it's in unrest, it's at advisory in yellow. When you get an eruption, there are three main types of eruptions we can expect. One is a submarine eruption, and up here we have a cartoon of a rendition of what a submarine eruption could look like in cross-section. Sometimes the material can reach the ocean surface, sometimes it's completely contained by the ocean. We can get dry eruptions on land. So this would be in an area where there isn't too much groundwater, it's not coastal, and it will form a cinder cone and lava flows, some other hazards as well. But the worst case scenario is what we would call wet eruptions. So this would be either on the coast or in a place with lots of groundwater, and you would get something that looks like that. So there can be surges that has huge life safety implications, and the products can go some distance. There's evidence that these all have happened. So if we just look at Ta'u, you can see Faleasau, this is one of the villages, it's within a tuff cone. So that's an evidence of a past wet eruption. If you look on the landscape, you can see all these little cinder cones. I sometimes call them pimples. So these are evidence of past dry eruptions. You can also see this huge scarp here. This is a landslide scarp. I'll be talking about that when we get to the volcano more specifically. So a cartoon rendition of what might happen. Again, you can get, this is for Hawaii. It doesn't really show well what a wet eruption would look like, but it's really similar volcanic hazards to Hawaii. So cinder cone formation, tephra, fog, gases, lava flows, interactions with the ocean that are more explosive, and so forth. So that's what happened in 2022. I'm now going to just do a little vignette on each volcano, what we know so far. And we are going to start with Tutuila. So Tutuila is a shield volcano. It may be erupted around 1200 CE, but it definitely erupted within the last 1600 years. This is a Google image of the island and then a more topographic view of the island. You can see it is heavily eroded. You can also see these features, these tuff cone features and cinder cones. And this is a tuff cone as well. So this is just some photos of what it looks like when you're there. This is Anu'u, so that tuff cone on the east side. You can see it's just offshore. This is the smallest of the 4 populated islands. But a lot of it is eroded interiors of volcanoes and lava flows as well. This is the main map that we have for Tutuila. It is from Stearns, who you may be familiar with for his work here. And this is from 1944. So we are working on updating this. If we look at the top, this is looking at the different ages of rocks on the surface. The pink is the youngest. So, and then red are the interior of eroded volcanoes and dikes as well. And then the other colors are volcanic rocks, mostly lava flows, going from this orange and then going eastward. This is a cross-section that Stearns put together. When we look along this line going here, so it's as though someone just took a slice through the earth, and what do you see? So what Stearns has suggested is that the Leone volcanics, which is this youngest area, it's actually more of a veneer on reefs and older sediments. We can then see this eroded volcano in the interior plug. A lot of stuff has been eroded, and then as we go further north, this is another shield volcano. You can see another plug as we go towards the north there, and then reefs and sediment that are building onto the volcano. I'd say that the general concepts here are probably right, but there's a lot that we can now say so many decades later. This is something that Drew Downs and I are working on right now. When was the last eruption? Again, we probably have had 2 in the last 1600 years. The Leone volcanics here. The Leone volcanics have lava flows. They have some scoria cones and also some tuff cones at the coast. So again, scoria cones are more those dry eruptions and tuff cones are those wet eruptions. And there's also ash around. There's the people who've done the most work on this are actually archaeologists, not geologists. So David Addison in particular has done quite a bit of work on it. And this is, if we look at this map of Tutuila, there's a star right here. This is an area where David Addison has done some dating. So we can see here that there's a layer with cultural deposits. So this may be ceramics, for example. And then there is volcanic ash. And there's also some charcoal. And so this was actually something that David was able to date. Because there's the cultural deposits underneath and also people dug through it, it's quite clear that people were there before and after. Unclear, we're guessing that people lived during as well, but that's a little bit harder to confirm. So that's what we know about the Leone volcanics. Anu'u, which is all the way over here, it looks young. That's all we can say right now. We had hoped to go out to see if we could collect some samples when we were there in August 2023, but the ocean was a bit rough. Moving on to Ofuolusenga, it's also a shield volcano. This has that witnessed eruption from 1866. Oh, I should say, going back real quick, it's thought that Tutuila is about 1.5 million years old, that volcano. This is much younger. This is 440,000 years old or so. These show a satellite image and a more topographic map of what Ofuolusenga looks like. And it's a stunning place, absolutely stunning. So here we actually see Ofu is here, Olusenga is here, and then this is Ta'u. And then you can see these rocks here. This is the same rocks, but looking from the other direction. The mapping here is maybe a little bit more recent, from the late 60s. So plate tectonics was just barely a thing. These geologic maps, there's a lot of work to be done. I'll just leave it at that. There's clearly a lot of dikes. So all of these lines that are darker here are exposed dikes. There's different ages of volcanics, it appears. And I love this cross-section here, which shows a guess as to how much has been eroded away. So this has been really eroded quite a bit. This is the best eyewitness account that we have of the eruption in 1866. In purple is when there are dates, and then in blue are some of the more interesting geological things. I will say this narrative is reflective of its time. There's some unfortunate descriptions of the people who lived on Ofuolusenga. It's what we have, unfortunately. But so here on the 7th of September, there was a lot of earthquakes that started all of a sudden. 2 days later, on the 9th, really ramped up. And then on the 12th, there was a commotion that was observed in the ocean. It appeared like a surf breaking over a sunken rock. And that's when it was clear at daylight that there was an eruption going on. First, there was a couple of explosions an hour, but then it got more intense. And soon there was mud and dense columns of material that went up to 2,000 feet in the air. You couldn't see Olusenga from Ta'u, and that's a bit unusual. They didn't see any flame, so everything was subdued by the ocean, the lava, or covered by the ocean. But the ocean had a light sulfur tinge for 10 miles round. People had to move from the closest point of the eruption. It was very unpleasant. There's 3 days of this, then it died down. But again, this is in September, and in November, that's when it was said that maybe activity had really diminished by that point. So it's a really impressive account of a 2-month-ish long eruption with a 5 days-ish of onset. Again, not on land, offshore, submarine, really well contained by the ocean, but it still sent ash quite a height. And sounds terrifying to live through. There was a NOAA cruise a while back that did a bathymetric survey, so that's like an underwater topographic map. And this is the best guess we have as to where that 1866 vent is. There's that landform under the ocean, and it's the right distance from the accounts. Moving on to Ta'u, also a shield volcano. Now it's 70,000 years old. We think it probably erupted in the Holocene, but we don't have a definitive date. This is what it looks like. This is the tuff cone in Faleasau. So here we can see a little bit of it as well. This is just the cliff, though. You can see the various layers in a lot more detail. The mapping here also dates to the late 60s. These look like bugs to me, but these are all the different cinder cones that have been mapped. You can see there's these different formations. At the time, I think they interpreted what is clearly a landslide to our modern eye, or more modern eyes. They interpreted it as a caldera, but that's incorrect. There was some recent work by some people who care a lot about big landslides, and they dated this landslide to about 22,000 years ago. So that definitely took a sizable chunk, and presumably the deposits are offshore now. We had Christine Tomnico. She worked with Drew Downs and myself this summer. She is from Tutuila. She graduated from the American Samoa Community College and also from UH Hilo. And the question that we asked her was, okay, so we know if there's an eruption in the Manua Islands, it will be very unpleasant for the people of Manua. But could it also affect the people in Tutuila? So this is 60 miles away. And so she did modeling with ASH 3D, looking at different column heights and seasons. Different times of years had different wind patterns. And she was able to get ASH to Tutuila, but it took a really tall eruption. So most of the time, it seems like the gas and ash impacts would be contained to the Manua Islands. But in a really serious situation, it could also affect the whole territory. And while gas and ash impacts of the amount she was able to model, don't generally pose a life safety risk, it is really scary and really unpleasant. And that would be a lot more people than just the people of the Manua Islands who would be impacted. So Christine did great. I hope that we'll never see the situations that she has modeled. I'll end looking at our volcano tour with Wailu'u. This is the submarine volcano. It is presently about just under half a mile under the sea surface. And it is the youngest volcano of the Samoan hotspot. It's erupted 3 times in the last 50 years. And this is a beautiful topographic, bathymetric rendition of this volcano. So there have been some repeat surveys here, and this is what the summit area looked like in 1999, in 2005, 2012, and 2017. And you can see between 1999 and 2005, this appears. So this is what was produced in the eruption in 2003. People who do big sea surveys often care quite a bit about the biology. I'm not a biologist, but this is an image I found quite interesting that looked at how quickly life goes back on these volcanoes after they've erupted. Currently, what we're doing is we monitor all the volcanoes of American Samoa. HVERI looks more after the volcano side, and the National Earthquake Center monitors where the earthquakes are happening. The seismic equipment that we have installed, it's not just important for volcanoes, but it's also really important for the PTWC, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. This really fills a big gap that there previously was. So it allows for faster locations of earthquakes in this part of the world that the PTWC looks after. So it's not just, the network we have set up is not just for volcanoes, it's for earthquake and tsunami as well. Just like here, we provide volcano alert levels for people on the ground and the aviation color code for airplanes. The National Weather Service translated it, both of these schema into Samoan. They were able to do this before we did the initial setting, and very grateful for that. So it's exactly the same system as we use in Hawaii and actually all the volcanoes in the US. We issue the same products that we issue in Hawaii, so volcano activity notices when something big is happening, like an alert level change. Scheduled updates, so the first Thursday of every month, if it's at normal and green, which we hope it will be for a very long time, we just push a summary of what has happened in the past month. And we also issue the same sorts of products that we issue here in Hawaii. This is the one that was issued in January. So it's one monthly update for the 3 volcanoes we monitor there. Usually it's quite short because it's been thankfully very quiet lately. The National Earthquake Information Center is charged with locating earthquakes. So if there's a magnitude 5 earthquake or greater, they will publish the location within 20 minutes. For smaller earthquakes, they can take up to 10 weeks. But here, it shows the threshold at which they will publish a location. So the NEIC is based in Golden, Colorado. I'll say that for Hawaiian earthquakes, it's actually HVO that does the location. So what we covered this evening is why there's the volcanoes in American Samoa. It's hotspot volcanoes. What happened in 2022? There was unrest, and we very rapidly had to respond to it. Huge thanks to the National Weather Service for facilitating a lot of our work. We looked at what future eruptions might look like. So most of the time, nothing, thankfully. Could get submarine eruptions, could get dry eruptions on land. We really hope to never see a coastal eruption. Those are the most dangerous. We had a brief look at each volcano and what the USGS does in terms of monitoring. So I'll leave it at that and happy to take any questions.
All right. So that was Dr. Natalia Deline with that update from Volcano Awareness Month. I'll just add that the USGS does now maintain a web page for American Samoa and Ta'u Island, among the other volcanoes. You see it's at green here, and it shows that recent activity. And I just thought we could round it out here by showing you this month's update from October 3rd from the USGS HVO as well. That basically says nothing is happening at any of these volcanoes, right, that were discussed there. So that's it. A little bit different presentation for us today, but worth going back and visiting it. Daniel, you add some thoughts here about American Samoa?
Yeah, you know, they don't really touch upon the history at all, and you know, this isn't really the place for it. And there's a whole conversation to be had about that. Really, though, the part that gets me is what if that earthquake didn't happen, or that series of earthquakes didn't happen. It's more than likely that American Samoa would still not have USGS presence out there. These quakes spurred them into being like, oh yeah, whose jurisdiction is that? Oh, it's ours. Oh yeah, right. Who's gonna take that on? Like HVO? Oh great. Because it feels like that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the USGS has this whole volcanic disaster assistance program where they have this whole hotshot team that deploys all over the world to help local authorities with volcanoes, right? So there's various parts of the USGS that could potentially respond, and maybe they had to decide which one of those that could was the one that actually should, and then they figured out that was under their new mission. Interesting, because that meant that there actually weren't any defined plans already as far as what to do, which sometimes that can be a bad thing, but sometimes it can be a good thing because you don't have anything pre-written that you have to follow that's outdated, for one.
Right.
So they
I
very
think
quickly were able to
you
get
have to use official USGS seismometers. You can just go and grab a Raspberry Pi, at least for the time being, and make it work.
right, yeah, the Raspberry Shakes. Yeah, they made those the official ones, and they're still running right now. Actually, that's how official they actually are, right? So great. Yeah, exactly. The same kind of thing where we see, you know, that kind of innovation being driven forward by the need, right? Similar to what we saw 2018, when suddenly they were able to fly drones, and suddenly they were able to do various of those kind of cutting edge things.
Yeah.
So really interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. You know, and she herself is not a Hawaiian or Samoan, but the team does include some people who have Hawaiian culture, right? And so that might be an interesting way. That might be why they actually chose Hawaii, because of that closer cultural connection. You can have a Hawaiian person go there, and maybe it's easier to build that trust, right, than have someone from Washington State show up there, right? So interesting how they went about that. And did you catch how many volcanoes are there in the U.S.? Pop quiz.
Did I catch how many there were in the U.S.? No.
How many volcanoes are in the U.S.? Anyone in our audience can drop that in the chat. I'll give you the answer before the end. Yeah, there's a interesting how much there is for the USGS to do. Yeah, just bonus points. If I had a sticker, I'd send you a sticker.
Quizzes always got me.
You already have one on your hat. But yeah, so that's it for our awareness presentation for this week. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it. We will be setting up, hopefully, to do the January Volcano Awareness Month coming up in a couple months, not that far out now. So just be expecting that. And one caveat there is that the visitor center up at the national park is probably going to be in construction. Maybe, seems like it. So that's going to complicate the Volcano Awareness Month. So presentations, usually most of them are in that building. So we'll see what happens, but we're expecting it still to go forward one way or another.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Dane, and mahalo as always to our ASL team.
All right, we got some guests coming in. So we got 200 plus, maybe 182, 161, and Ed goes with lots.
You guys can keep them coming. I'll type in a comment here as we're rolling in the outro. We'll put it on the screen here for you guys to check it out. So tease it out a little bit longer here for you guys to throw in some more guesses as we play our outro. So, but remember, this next week we'll be back on a Wednesday instead of Thursday, right? October 30th, not the 31st. We will keep our regular time at 5 p.m. Hawaiian time. And unless something happens between now and then, that's when we will see you. Anything else to add, Dane?
Nope, that's it for me.
All right. So mahalo from all of us here at HVERI and our ASL team. We appreciate all your support. And yeah, here goes our outro, and look in the chat for our answer here. All right. Mahalo, everyone. Till next week.